Bitcoin was not invented to make people rich. That's the story that took over. But it isn't where Bitcoin came from. Bitcoin was invented because someone, or a group of people, looked at the modern financial system and decided they didn't trust it anymore. Not the banks, not the government, not the currency itself. And here's the part that should stop you cold. They weren't wrong. Think about what you actually know about the money in your bank account. You know the number on the screen. You trust that if you walk up to an ATM, the cash will come out. You trust that the dollars in your account will still be worth something tomorrow. But have you ever asked, why do you trust that? Not philosophically, practically. What is that trust actually based on? Most people, if they're honest, can't answer that question. They trust the system because they've always trusted the system. Because their parents trusted it. Because everyone around them trusts it. Because the alternative, not trusting it, feels too uncomfortable to sit with. And for most of human history, that was enough. But in 2008, something happened that made millions of people suddenly very uncomfortable. They watched the institutions they'd trusted their entire lives nearly collapse overnight. They watched governments print trillions of dollars to prevent that collapse. They watched the people who caused the crisis get rescued. And then they watched the money in their savings accounts quietly lose purchasing power as inflation crept upward. They didn't lose trust all at once. It eroded, slowly, then quickly. Consider what the numbers actually showed. In the decade following 2008, the Federal Reserve's balance sheet grew from under $1 trillion to over $4 trillion. The wealthiest 1% of Americans captured more than 90% of all income gains during the early recovery years. Meanwhile, median household wealth took over a decade to return to pre-crisis levels. The system recovered. The people inside it recovered at very different speeds. And in that gap, between the system's recovery and ordinary people's recovery, something philosophical started to shift. And in that erosion, a question started to form. What if there was a kind of money that didn't require trust in any institution at all? What if money could exist outside the system entirely? That question is why Bitcoin exists. Meet Marcus. He's 36 years old. He lives in Phoenix, Arizona. He works as a senior technician at an HVAC company, the kind of work that keeps other people comfortable while he spends his days in attics and crawl spaces. He earns about $61,000 a year. After taxes, that's roughly $3,800 a month. Rent, $1,400. Truck payment, $420. Insurance, utilities, groceries, another $750. He's left with about $1,200 a month. He tries to save $400 of it. Most months, he manages. Marcus doesn't think of himself as politically minded. He doesn't read economic theory. But in 2010, 2 years after the financial crisis, he noticed something. His savings account had a balance that kept going up. But what that balance could actually buy kept going down. Groceries cost more. His rent went up. Gas prices climbed. He was saving more dollars and somehow falling behind. He mentioned it to a coworker who laughed and said, "That's just inflation." As if it were weather. As if it were just something that happened to you. Marcus didn't find that funny. He found it deeply strange. He had done everything right. He had worked, saved, been responsible. And the system had quietly taken something from him anyway. Not through a bad decision, not through bad luck. Through a mechanism he didn't fully understand and had never agreed to. That feeling, that quiet, unsettling sense that the rules were being changed on him, is the same feeling that drove a lot of people toward Bitcoin. Not greed. Something older than greed. The desire to hold something that couldn't be taken. Here is the first thing you need to understand. Every currency in the world today is created by human decision, not by gold, not by labor, not by anything fixed or finite, by decision. When the Federal Reserve decides to expand the money supply, it does. When a government decides to print money to cover its debts, it can. The dollar in your pocket exists because the United States government says it does. And the United States government can, and does, change how many of those dollars exist. Between 2020 and 2021 alone, the U.S. money supply increased by nearly 40%. 40% in a single year. That money didn't come from anywhere. It was created. And when you create more of something, each existing unit becomes worth a little less. This is not a secret. Economists have known this for centuries. But most people never feel it directly. They just notice, slowly, that the same paycheck buys less than it used to. That the apartment they could afford 5 years ago is now out of reach. That their savings account balance goes up, while their actual financial position doesn't. Here is what most people miss. This isn't a bug in the system. It's how the system is designed to work. Moderate inflation encourages spending, encourages borrowing, keeps the economy moving. The people who designed the modern monetary system made a deliberate choice. They chose a currency that slowly loses value over time. Because a currency that loses value slowly is one that people keep moving, keep spending, keep investing. And a moving economy is easier to manage than a stagnant one. The cost of that choice gets paid by people like Marcus, people who save in dollars, people who hold cash, people who do exactly what they were told to do and still fall behind. In October 2008, right in the middle of the financial crisis, a document appeared on the internet. 9 pages long, written under the name Satoshi Nakamoto. Nobody knew who that was. Nobody still knows. The document was titled Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. It didn't sound like a revolution. It read like a technical paper. But buried inside it was a message so pointed it could only have been written by someone who understood exactly what had just happened to the global financial system. The very first block of Bitcoin ever mined, called the Genesis block, contained a hidden message, encoded directly into the code itself. It read, "Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks," a headline from that day's newspaper. Satoshi wasn't just building a new currency. He was making a statement about the old one. He was saying, this is why this needs to exist. This is the second hidden rule. Bitcoin wasn't designed to be an investment. It was designed to be an exit. An exit from a system where a small group of people, central bankers, government officials, financial executives, have the power to change the rules of money without asking anyone's permission. Where your savings can be quietly eroded by decisions made in rooms you'll never enter. Where the money you hold is only worth what someone else decides it's worth. Bitcoin's design was a direct response to each of those features. Fixed supply. Only 21 million Bitcoin will ever exist. No one can create more. Decentralized. No government, no bank. No individual controls it. Transparent. Every transaction is recorded on a public ledger anyone can verify. It wasn't perfect. It came with its own risks, its own volatility, its own vulnerabilities. But its architecture was a mirror held up to the existing system, showing exactly what people had decided they no longer trusted. To understand why Bitcoin struck a nerve, you have to understand something about trust. Trust in money is not one thing, it's a stack. At the bottom, you trust that the physical currency won't be counterfeited. Above that, you trust that the bank holding your money won't disappear. Above that, you trust that the government backing the bank is stable. Above that, you trust that the people running the monetary system are making decisions in your interest. For most of the 20th century, most Americans trusted all four layers. Not because they thought about it, because nothing had happened to make them question it. Then 2008 happened, and the fourth layer, trust in the people running the system, cracked. Not just for economists and policy critics, for ordinary people. For people like Marcus, who noticed that his savings bought less every year and couldn't get a clear answer about why. For retirees who watched their 401ks drop 40% and then watched the stock market recover while their own financial lives didn't. For younger people who came of age in the aftermath of the crisis and started asking whether the institutions their parents had trusted actually deserved that trust. There's a detail that captures this shift precisely. In 2009, the year Bitcoin launched, a Gallup poll found that Americans' trust in banks had fallen to its lowest point in history. Only 22% of Americans said they had a great deal, or quite a lot, of confidence in banks. That number had been above 60% in the early 1980s. An entire generation had grown up trusting the system. A new generation was growing up questioning it. Bitcoin arrived into that cracked trust. It didn't just offer a different currency. It offered a different philosophy. The philosophy was simple. You shouldn't have to trust anyone. The rules should be written into the math. And math doesn't change based on who's in charge. Now this idea has real problems. A currency with no central authority also has no one to call when things go wrong. No FDIC insurance. No customer service. No recourse if you lose your private key. The volatility alone has made Bitcoin a poor store of value for many of the people it was supposedly designed to help. But the philosophy itself resonated, because the philosophy was pointing at something real, something that had been there all along, that the money in your wallet is not a neutral object, it is a political instrument, controlled by people with their own interests, subject to decisions you never voted on. Marcus eventually put $2,000 into Bitcoin in 2017. He watched it go to $7,000, then to $800. He didn't sell at the high. He held on through the crash. By 2021, it was worth more than $60,000 at its peak. But this story isn't really about the price. It's about what the price represented to people like Marcus. For the first time in his financial life, he held something that no central bank could inflate away. Something that no government decision could dilute. Something that existed entirely outside the system that had quietly been taking from him for years. Whether that turns out to be a permanent transformation in how money works, nobody knows. Bitcoin is still volatile, still speculative, still far from the stable store of value its creator imagined. But its existence reveals something that was already true before anyone heard of Satoshi Nakamoto. Trust in money is not guaranteed. It is earned. And it can be lost. Think about what happened in Cyprus in 2013. The country's banking system collapsed. The government, under pressure from the European Union, announced a plan to seize a percentage of deposits directly from citizens' bank accounts. Not a tax. Not a policy, a direct seizure. People with savings above a certain threshold, woke up one morning to find that a portion of their money they had earned, saved, deposited, was simply gone. The government took it, legally, overnight. Overnight, Google searches for Bitcoin in Cyprus spiked by over 1,000%. People weren't searching because they believed in the technology. They were searching because they had just learned something visceral about the money they thought they owned. It could be taken, at any time, by the people who controlled the system, and there was nothing they could do about it. The history of currency is full of moments when governments debased their coinage, when central banks printed too much, when the people holding the currency paid the price for decisions they never made. The Roman Empire did it. Weimar Germany did it. Zimbabwe did it. The United States, through more sophisticated mechanisms, does a version of it routinely. What changed in 2008 wasn't the existence of these mechanisms. What changed was that millions of ordinary people, for the first time, noticed them. And some of them started looking for a door. Here is what Bitcoin actually is, stripped of the speculation and the headlines and the price charts. It is a record of distrust, a 21 million unit monument to the moment when enough people looked at the financial system and decided they no longer believed in it the way they once had. You can think that's rational. You can think that's paranoid. But the distrust itself is not irrational. The system does change the rules. The currency does lose value over time. The people who design monetary policy are not elected, are not fully accountable, and do not always make decisions that benefit the people holding the currency. These are facts, not conspiracy theories. Bitcoin didn't create those facts. It just made them visible in a new way. Marcus still has his Bitcoin. He still works in attics and crawl spaces. He still watches his purchasing power get quietly chipped away, year after year, in the savings account he was always told was the responsible choice. But now he understands something he didn't understand before. Money is not a neutral object sitting outside of politics, outside of power, outside of human decision. Money is one of the most political things that exists, and the people who control it have always known that. Most of the people using it never did. Bitcoin didn't fix the system, but it asked a question the system had never been forced to answer. What happens when people stop believing in your money? We're still finding out.